13 Reasons Why has more filler than an Instagram model's lips. Before I start the video, I just want to raise a wee white flag because I know people get extremely passionate about this show, whether it be on one end of the spectrum or the other. When you digest something, whether that's something you watch, something you listen to, something you read, your personal bias and your own personal opinion is what impacts what you then think of it. This is something that people tend to get their backs up about when it's really just completely natural and it's nothing to get frustrated or angry with other people over. I will say that in order to make this review as non-biased as possible, I left my own personal opinions at the door and just focused on directorial techniques, editing style, the overall creation of the show to really decide what I thought of it, and then I brought in my opinions to kind of see how that correlated. So if you're looking for petty finger pointing, that's not what we found here, I'm sorry. The fourth and final season of 13 Reasons Why has been out for just 24 hours as I'm filming this, and already a lot of people have a lot to say about it. So in this video I'm going to be explaining the ending and reviewing the grand finale of this Netflix phenomenon. Throughout the video I'm going to cover the storyline as a whole, how the show was actually made, as well as some different themes and issues to explain that while there was shining moments, season 4 of 13 Reasons Why made some extremely big mistakes. Before I continue, I do want to give a standard content warning. I will be discussing several sensitive subjects that are brought up and depicted in the show, so if this is not in your best interest to watch, by all means click off the video, go and watch one of my other ones, and I'll see you in the next. Starting things off, I looked at the structure of the season. We still get a warning pre each episode, so there's not really anything new there. The only big difference we saw is that it is now in written form and they have edited out the kind of spoken version with the cast. But one massive difference we saw in the format was that it's no longer 13 episodes. It is whittled down to 10, technically 11 if you count the fact that the season finale is about 100 minutes long. Personally, I think the core story without the tangents could have been covered in 8, but they went for 10/11. I'd be interested to know at this point if that was a stipulation by Netflix, like yes, you can get renewed for season 4 if you cap it to 10 episodes, or if that was a creative decision by the creators of the show. At the minute, I've not found evidence to support either, so I'm just putting that out into the abyss. Style-wise, we saw the same kind of things coming through. It was relatively consistent, especially in terms of colour. We see them using saturation to stipulate different timelines, and at the moment, I'm not going to get nitpicky about that. We've seen it time and time again, we're seeing it in loads of other projects now. It's really not something to get fussed over. In terms of look, style, costume, hair, all that kind of thing, the characters did look more mature, and no, that is not a subtle dig at people in their late 20s/30s playing teenagers. I just mean that they looked a little bit older, they looked more mature, they looked as if time had passed. The clothing choices and hair choices seemed relative to the age that they were meant to be portraying. A huge jump that they made in terms of style in this season though was in the editing, which part of me really liked and the other part of me absolutely hated. Do I wish the show had stayed true to its roots of realism from season 1? Absolutely. But when you look at how the storytelling has changed, taking realism editing to an extremely dramatic and excessive storyline would have looked completely naff. So at least I can appreciate that they took that side and ran with it. I will say that this choppy, stylised kind of way of editing did come across really well, especially when it was, you know, partnered together with good use of sound, and we saw this when a few characters were having what I'll call episodes or attacks. Even if we focus on Clay's character in particular, the disjointed cuts when he was going through episodes really showed how disjointed he and his memory was becoming, which matches really well with his diagnosis of dissociation, which we find out later in the season is in relation to his anxiety disorder. So in that way, it was really effective, but in terms of the normal storytelling, it didn't seem like it was necessary, and yet it seemed to pop up when it didn't really have a place. When you're employing stylised editing, it's to have impact and it's to really add gravity to areas that you want, and if you start flinging it out willy-nilly, it's not going to have that. And yes, you could say that it's said to represent the gradual and constantly evolving unravelling of Clay's mind throughout the season. After all, it does focus primarily on him, but it seemed to lose traction with me after the first 2 or 3 episodes. Moving on to what we hear in the series, the main method of storytelling, I guess you could call it, and that is the script and the dialogue. The scripting's kind of turned into being really on the nose over the seasons, and it kind of felt like you were being talked down to and it was all being dumbed down for you like you were a child, which is a massive juxtaposition considering you're saying that these are severe issues that you need to take seriously, But how can you do that when you're speaking to people like they're petulant? Even for a young adult or teen drama, it was extremely immature in the way that some of it came across. And especially when you look at one of the massive evolutions that's happened in cinema over the past 5 years, is the acknowledgement that even though certain members of audiences aren't going to be in the best position to digest what you're showing them, audiences as a whole are not stupid. You do not need to give them every single thing. A prime example would be when The Quiet Place came out. This was a film with very little dialogue, and they didn't see fit to spoon feed the audience with every little thing that they needed to know. They left them to piece it together by themselves, and it was extremely successful. Whereas 13 Reasons Why just sits there and just feeds you everything you need and leaves you to do very little discovery on your own, which makes it a very lazy watch, and it feels like you don't really need to employ much thinking. Which again, juxtaposition saying these are things you need to think about, but we're going to take away any point of you actually thinking. Say we look at some particulars dialogue wise. You've got a lot of what I call timestamps, and it's lines, words and conversations between characters that are orchestrated specifically to let the audience know how much time has passed, what time of day or year it is, what other events are going on around it, and they're always extremely obvious and just awkward. They're literally there just to fill in the gaps of what, for some bizarre reason, we don't get to see, or the stuff that is extremely glossed over. Something else I feel the need to point out is that a lot of the swearing from the core characters came across unnecessary and forced, and I found myself like cringing sometimes when it happened. So, side note, swearing is not the only way to show that a character is getting older and maturing. Moving on, from this point in the video, when I pick up on different themes and story points, I will bring up characters' performances and strong performances in the show, but there are some specific shout outs that I want to give, because even though, you know, the storyline wasn't always great for me, I felt like even though if I didn't enjoy what was happening on screen, I enjoyed how the actors were doing it. So in my opinion, big shout outs go to Dylan Minnette, Brandon Flynn, Miles Heiser, Amy Hargreaves and Gary Sinise. Although there's specific shining moments for everyone else in the show, I did just want to give those couple a specific tip of the hat because I thought they did very well consistently throughout. Storyline wise, I mentioned in my trailer reaction breakdown video that I had a couple of concerns, and I'm not entirely surprised that a lot of them became well founded. The major overarching issue for me seems to be that the people who like or enjoy this show at this point, for the most part, seem to do that because of the drama or mystery of it all, or like the relationships of it all, and completely blind eye and blindside the severe issues that it stems from. For me, this is a combined issue for the way in which the show is made and the people who watch it on such a superficial level, and the issue that we have with that in our society. But that's not to say that there weren't little positives scattered throughout the season. I'm just saying that what the main overarching issue for me was. From the start, the season opens on a funeral and once again hammers home the same core message that gripped most of its fans from season 1, and that is the fragility of life. That life is short, that we live in a time where teenagers actively have to survive growing up and survive living in a high school culture. We're taken back and forth to this funeral setting multiple times over the 10 episodes, but we don't actually find out whose it is until the last minute, and I'm sorry for any Justin Foley fans out there. Surprise, it's his. Justin's dead. I know, sad. I'm gonna cover more of the particulars of his arc and why his character died and what that entailed, but I do want to first address the fact that there was a funeral in the first place. It seemed really unnecessary to me. Initially I hoped that we were seeing flashbacks of Monty's funeral, but quickly realised that that wasn't going to be the case, and just by process of elimination guessed that it was Justin's and just thought, oh god, here we go. We're going down this road again. It didn't seem like it added much to the storyline for me. It didn't seem like it added anything new. It just felt like it was rehashing what the show has already shown us and told us before, so what's the point? The fact that they felt they needed to have the death of another core character to me says one of three things. 1. the previous deaths of other core characters in the show weren't handled to a degree that was sufficient enough to leave the audience with a lasting message. 2, they felt like they needed to shock the audience into caring about the season or buying into it, because as we know, when you have an emotional catharsis towards the end of a film or TV show, audience appreciation for that project and audience satisfaction goes up. Why did this happen in the last episode? And 3, they felt like there was actively no other way they could have shown it, which to me is just daft, and I'm not even a writer. There are plenty other ways to show people that life is short without having life taken away, and there's loads of other plot points in the show that do just that. The looming threat that Alex and Jessica could potentially go to jail at any point makes them and their friends value life. The various people they've already lost in the show, from Hannah to Monty, even Zach's dad, show this. The lengths that Tyler's character nearly went to show that. And the highly excessive shooter drill sure as hell shows that. So when you take personal opinion out of it and you look at the evidence, what is the purpose? What was the grounds on which it was sufficient to kill Justin's character off? There weren't any, and there wasn't one, and this was the season's first major mistake. And this was in the first 5 minutes, people! Whoa! Next I want to cover the themes of addiction, substance use and HIV/AIDS. With the addiction and substance use kind of storylines, we see that mainly through Justin and Zach. We find out that Justin is out of recovery, which is really consistent with where we saw him at the end of season 3, and we see that he's focusing on himself, and he has a conversation with Jessica that's actually quite realistic, saying that he needs to make himself a priority. Something that did seem a little bit strange is that Zach's substance use kind of goes off unnoticed and again without consequence. And then at the end it seems like he's just kicked it. And you would believe that what happens to Justin is what kind of gives him a kick up the ass to kind of get sober in his mind, but it seemed like very little attention was paid to it, which is strange considering how much of the forefront of Justin's storyline and everything that we've seen of him on screen it has been. And of course, when we talk about HIV/AIDS, we are talking about Justin's storyline, the death of his character, and the big twist ending of the season, as it's been called. It is revealed at the last minute that Justin has been living with HIV-1 for some time, and due to the underlying symptoms, the lack of testing or treatment, it has progressed to AIDS, which he will eventually die from. While this is a serious issue that needs talked about, and while it seems realistic for someone who's gone through the things that his character has for this to come up, it seemed very out of nowhere, which again I understand can happen, but hear me out. It came across as either a last-ditch effort to tug on people's heartstrings at the end of the season and almost distract from the less strong aspects of the show, or a poor attempt at adding yet another real life issue to the list that they've touched on, which frankly deserves more than the 5 to 6 educational minutes that it got on screen and roughly the 9 minutes of crying montage filler that it got around it. As I said, this issue is serious and it deserves a heck of a lot more attention than that if you're going to feature it in a show. It is not a last minute throw in. From my perspective, this show has quite a reputation for biting off more than it can chew in terms of issues, and as a result we see loads of issues being covered with small amounts of screen time as opposed to less issues being covered in a more comprehensive and educational and useful way. The mere fact that this video needs to be really long to cover all the issues that they stumble in and out of proves the point. All that being said though, although I did not like this arc and I didn't find it necessary and I honestly think it shouldn't have happened in the first place, Brandon Flynn acted the hell out of those scenes, so well done, son. The next major area that I want to cover is consequences. Since it started, 13 Reasons has been highly thematically relying on the idea of consequences, even when we go back to Hannah wanting people to be held accountable for the wrongs that they had so lightly gotten away with. Which is why I kind of found it weird that we see little to no consequences for so many characters and so many people specifically in this season. It just seems unrealistic, especially for a show whose premise started out as shedding a light on particular issues and the consequences that they then have. And I say started off because it's definitely distanced itself from that path since season 1. This isn't to say that the main goal of a show can't change and evolve as it does. That's absolutely fine. If they came forward and said, we're not focusing so much on this, we're going to focus more on telling a story and intrigue and things like that, that would have been fine. The unnecessary and excessive points would have made complete sense, or at least more sense. But they never did. They still maintained that it was all about shedding light on severe issues and the consequences that those wrongs have. But how is any audience meant to take that seriously and understand the severity of the issues they're discussing when pretty much everyone gets away with so much? I won't say they get away with everything, because there are some elements of consequence that I actually quite liked and I found satisfying to watch. I just wish we'd seen more of that. Of course, I know a lot of people are going to say that what happens to Justin is a consequence of his addiction, although I know a lot of people will get very nitpicky and say that a lot of those choices were made for him, but we're not here to debate that. What I want to say is that while that would hold some truth, I've already covered why his death is completely insufficient for anything in the show, so I'm just going to leave that there. Moving on to a really positive note, something that I have always praised 13 Reasons Why on is their villain and victim paradox. At various points throughout the series, not just this season, we're taken on a journey to empathise with a victim and feel anger towards the villains who are doing these things to them, only to later have the tables turned and discover that the victim could have potentially been a villain to others as well, and likewise the villain could be a victim of other people. It forces people to confront what I personally think is one of the most difficult realities of our life, and that is that people who do wrongs, people who do monstrous things, are not just monsters. They're also people. It's easier to distance from that fact. It's easier to call someone a monster because that's dehumanising. That's distant from you, that's different from you. But to face the reality and say that this is a person that did a monstrous thing or monstrous things gives them some sort of parallel to you, because you're also a person, and that means that people can do those wrongs, and that means that other people around you can do those wrongs. It's frightening, it's terrifying, but it's something that needs to be acknowledged. So if we were to look at particular examples for this season and just say Clay, for example, he vandalises school property, he sets fire to a car, he is violent towards other people, but he's also a victim. And if you were looking at the character of Tyler, we've seen him go from victim to villain to victim to villain, back to victim. We've seen him go through so many different arcs, and it's refreshing to see a series actually tackle that. Along with continuity issues, we see a lot of tangents, and they just pop up left, right and centre throughout the season that don't really add anything to the story and just almost pad it out. Episode 4, called Senior Camping Trip, was a major tangent that was mostly filler content that even if you're not invested in the show, you're just kind of sitting there like, okay, can we get back on track please? It reminded me a bit of that Stranger Things episode where Eleven just goes MIA. At least in Stranger Things, they still have seasons to go, potentially 2, we're not certain yet, but they're still continuing. They could reintroduce that later on and we'd be like, oh, that's why you brought it up, whereas 13 Reasons Why is over. They can't bring up why that was relevant, so why did we see it? This is the type of thing I'm talking about when I said that I thought the actual story could have been condensed into 8 episodes because there was that much filler. But I can move on to something that was really, really successful for me and a good thing about this season, which you can call it a saving grace if you like. It was Clay's character arc. His mental state being at the forefront and him narrating the show is pretty much what carried it for me. It was one of the only things I was interested in because it linked it back to season 1, which in my opinion was the series' strongest. But even at that, the season has this like excessively melodramatic and mystery to be solved vibe that when you pair it with the really stylized editing to the degree that it was done, makes even the most grounding and teachable moments appear unrealistic and inaccessible, which is a shame because people really could have learned something. I did really like that we saw the process of diagnosis for Clay. He was diagnosed with anxiety, depression and dissociation as a symptom. I also really like that that was covered. Dissociation is often seen as a feature of DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, but dissociation can be a symptom for pretty much every other mental health issue. So it was refreshing to see that mentioned because I think when a lot of people picture someone dissociating, and not knowing what that dissociated self is doing. A lot of people think that that's almost like a form of psychosis, and it's just not the case. So I liked how that challenged people's kind of lack of knowledge on that part. Another thing that I really want to praise the show on is a realistic depiction of anxiety attacks. Of course, that's not going to be for everyone. It's just for people who have them to that degree. But if you know someone who does, or you yourself do, I would imagine that there was some like, wow, that be me. This was the first time that I've seen something that so closely mirrors what my body's reaction to anxiety attacks would be. I've not had an anxiety attack in well over a year at this point. Wow, well over a year? The end of this month will be a year and a half. Oh, yeah! I digress. What I'm trying to say is the severity, like the debilitation was, I could definitely resonate with that. And I also want to give specific mention to Alex's anxiety/panic attack in relation to his traumatic brain injury. This was scarily like what my anxiety attacks were like. The overwhelming sensations, the doom feeling, the genuine pain with every breath or movement. And also I particularly liked when his friend Charlie was saying focus on your hands. In terms of the mental health arcs, he is probably a shining example of what you can be like as a friend to someone that deals with a mental health issue. Something else I really liked was the introduction of Dr. Ellman. We've heard him mentioned, but we've never really seen him or had some face-to-face interaction. It was a much needed lull and voice of reason in how frantic everything was, although I'm concerned that a lot of people will miss the masses of information that we got from his scenes because it's not high drama, because sadly in our society if it's not high drama people don't tend to care. A big thing I was gutted about with his scenes with Clay though is that there was no mention of a spectrum. Clay's anxiety that we see in the show is severe, but anxiety exists on a spectrum. It just so happens that his is severe. All it would have taken is some sort of clarity where Clay is like, no, this can't be anxiety, this is something different, this is so extreme, I feel like I'm dying. And all it would take is Dr. Ellman to say, you know, anxiety exists on a spectrum, Clay. Just because you don't experience it the same as someone else doesn't mean that it's invalid or that there's something really wrong with you. This is natural in relation to what you've been through. And voila! The educational confetti falls upon the audience. The next issue that the show covers is violence. And it's very relevant to some of the things that we're seeing just now, especially when you look at the racially motivated elements of it, which, by the way, the show, I've seen a lot of people criticising its coverage of that kind of issue. Do you really think that this show was filmed in the past week? No. This show was filmed months ago, which I think rings true to the fact that these issues have been going along for many, many, many moons, as opposed to just in the past week like some people believe. The violence that's depicted in the show is between students. You see it between students and teachers, you see it between students and the police. It really does show quite a lot of different variables. A specific part that I'm going to mention is when there's a riot that starts out at the school, and it starts because there's preferential treatment based on the race of two students that start a fight. So we see the police going for the black student, whereas also the white student was fighting, and the students start to question, hang on, why are they both not being reprimanded? If it's the violence that's the issue, why are you only reprimanding one of them? From here, a lot of things escalate because it's in relation to things that people don't really see acceptable in the school, such as CCTV cameras, the kids essentially being tracked and traced, which I thought was very Black Mirror. I didn't think they were going to go down that route. But we do see it escalating into what is a full-scale riot, and the kids are standing their ground and you've got the authorities standing theirs, and it's just a massive clash. Now, from what I've seen, a lot of people are taking issue with the fact that they showed a riot. So to people who think that, I just want to highlight, when something is depicted in a TV show or in a film, it does not mean that the creators are saying, yes, we endorse this, yes, this is right. The creators of Hannibal are not waving a wee white flag with blood on it going, yay, cannibalism! It's just not a thing. So people need to stop with this whole rhetoric that as soon as a TV show or a film shows something that's bad behaviour, that they're endorsing it to the public. They're not. And this is one of the few points in the storyline that we see genuine consequence. One last thing that I want to mention with violence is in relation to Tony's character. It was so cool to see this really nice full circle moment where he went from someone who struggled with anger management and was going to boxing classes and things like that as a condition of his parole to someone who is a trained fighter, and it gets him a scholarship. You know, he's harnessed something that was a burden to him and now it's given him a future. Even with that, they didn't shy away from the dangers that still come from it. There was a racially motivated opponent that he fought against that was really going for him, not because it was a fight and that's what you're supposed to do. He was coming for him because he was a white supremacist. So they showed that it was a good thing for him, but they still showed the dangers. And they highlighted the fact that going into that career path, if he chose to, whether it was just in college or beyond that, because of who he is, there would be an additional threat. And I thought it was really quite, like, well handled for them to mention that. We're getting there, guys. We have 2 more themes. It's not my fault they bit off more than they could chew. The next thing is something that's come up before in previous seasons, and that is guns/gun control. The episode called Thursday was hands down the hardest to watch. Doesn't mean that it was the best episode, but it was the hardest to watch because it was brutal. It reminded me of the One Tree Hill school shooting episode, which was so emotionally charged. Like, I'm guessing that if you're watching this, you've watched the show, so you know that there was a shooter drill that was taken wildly out of hand to make it seem real. I don't know why you would want to, and naturally Clay is extremely angry about this. The rage from him is really well founded in my opinion, although it does come from his kind of mid-breakdown, so my concern is that people look at that perspective as nonsensical. The point that this rage kind of covers is that why is there so much effort being put into preparing children to be able to protect themselves rather than preparing and teaching people not to kill in the first place. It's kind of like, would you deck out a house with 100 fire extinguishers or just make it less likely that a fire's gonna happen? It seems fitting to actually mention that the show has previously been criticised for mentioning guns at all and for showing them in the hands of teenagers at all. But there's this really good scene between Tyler and an admissions officer when he's having his college interview or university interview, and he says a really interesting quote, so I'm gonna see if I can insert that scene right here. I just really enjoyed that scene. I felt like that little piece of dialogue offered more than what the entire camping episode said. Lastly, we have sexuality as a kind of flowing theme throughout the season. You see Jessica coming into her own, making progress again from where we've seen her, although very little productive discussion about sexual assault kind of comes into it, which is a shame. But it's really cool to kind of see her in scenes where she's more comfortable with her body, she's more comfortable around other people, she's more comfortable in herself, and she still has a voice, which is great. And of course, sexual orientation does come up with different key characters. So you've got Alex, Charles, Winston, among others, if you include Tony and his boyfriend, and some officials at the school, which was actually quite cool to see. There's also a scene where people in the football team learn about Monty's sexuality, even though he is no longer with them, and they accept him regardless. I quite liked that, but it did make you feel like it's such a shame. He felt like he couldn't say that around those people, around his friends, and they would have accepted him regardless. There was also a refreshing take on sexuality and how attraction works. You've got Charles saying, I love people for people. You've got Winston saying, you know, you're just you and that's all I care about. It's this kind of no labels mentality that a lot more people nowadays kind of go with. In terms of other people's reactions, you've got the footballer's reaction to Monty, which I mentioned, but you've also got Alex and Charles's family's reaction, which were really quite nice. You also got this moment where Charles and Alex were crowned as prom royalty. It was very Glee, wasn't it? My favourite thing about that scene was the football team's support. This guy in the background right here is pure joy Tell me otherwise. But it was really nice to see this be reintroduced back into the storyline since we've seen, you know, everything that went on with Hannah and the kiss and the photograph and everything like that. And we've had coming outs before on the show. So it was nice to see this kind of be reintroduced. Reintroduced is the right, yes, reintroduced. Oh my god, we covered all the issues. Ladies and gentlemen, we made it. So to finish, overall, 13 Reasons Why is a show that was created to shed light on a harsh reality for mental health and other difficult issues facing people today, regardless of age. The fact that these issues were depicted facing teenagers kind of forced people to confront the fact that just because people are younger doesn't mean they're being dramatic or doing things for attention. Things like mental health, sexual assault and other life issues and hurdles do not discriminate based on what age you are. They will come to you regardless. After season 1, which in my personal opinion was very well done, its handling of those issues, however, has been severely diluted, and as a result we've seen missed opportunities for learning, lack of clear communication and a missed chance to tell stories that have real gravity and potential to teach lessons. If they wanted to show the reality and the brutality of life and the issues that they shared in season 1, which again I think was the strongest, they would have just left it there. The truest thing they could have done is show that when someone makes that kind of choice, when these things happen in people's lives, when someone chooses to take their own life, nothing happens after that. You do not get answers. The people on the outside looking in do not get answers. They don't get to see how their family and friends cope afterwards. Everything just stops. And I think that would have been a lot more poignant, it would have spoken louder and it would have said more. But if you set aside everything creatively with the show, I want to finish on what I think is the biggest and boldest mistake of the 13 Reasons Why series as a whole. And it's a mistake that you made. It maybe wasn't you directly, but the people watching it. They decided to be more pissed off and have more opinions and rant online about issues discussed in this show, rather than focusing on the real life ones that it's based on. For example, they were more enraged that a show showed a teen suicide than the fact that more and more teens are committing suicide every day. They care more about the little 6-minute reviews that rip the show to pieces rather than the lives that are being ripped to pieces by the issues that it portrays. This show is not perfect, and I am glad that it is over, because maybe now people can stop having petty arguments about it and start fighting to change the real issues and real versions of events that are happening right outside their door. Well, if you made it this far, congratulations, because that was a hell of a ride. I really didn't want to do a surface level review of this show, especially considering it was the last season. There was far too much to talk about, and I feel like doing even a 15-minute video on it would have been a disservice to the people who experience these things in real life. While I love film and TV and the creative elements of all of that, I love real life more and I love people more, so I wanted to do them a good service. So as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope some of the stuff that I said was useful or at least thought-provoking. If you would like to see more videos from me, don't worry, they're not all that long. I will put some stuff, videos, playlists or whatever up there. Links to social medias are down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big one of these. Leave one of those letting me know what you thought of season 4 of the series as a whole. But most importantly, please subscribe and turn all post notifications on. There's loads of new videos coming out right now and you don't want to miss them. But other than that, stay healthy, stay safe, much love, and I will see you very soon. Bye!